Invitados muy especiales desde Tennessee, el hermano Kivette y el hermano Julio de la Rosa Jimenez, que él va a traducir para
Vamos a intentarlo.
Esto no va a tardar mucho. Oh, I'm sorry, Julio.
Yeah, this will not last long with Julio interpreting for me.
Oye, esto no va a tardar mucho, así que Julio va a intentar interpretar para mí.
Does anyone speak Spanish and English? Anybody else here can speak?
Alguien
Raise your hand if he says something that's different than I say.
Ok, ¿alguien sabe si habla español también? Pueda decirle si él dice algo, yo digo algo diferente a él.
Yeah, he is a wonderful person.
Yo soy la mejor persona del mundo.
You say that about me?
Él no tanto.
How many understand Roll Tide?
¿Cuántos pueden decir roll tide? Ok.
My question is, are you going to try, really?
Yeah. Mi pregunta es, ¿puedes intentarlo?
Nice. I thought he was joking.
Oh, está bien, solo está bromeando.
I do believe this is his first time to interpret. He moved here about a year and a half ago.
Dice que en realidad soy el mejor pastor de todos y que estoy haciendo un muy buen trabajo. Gracias.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, everyone speaks English. We have no idea.
No, solo estamos bromeando en realidad.
Are you going to tell us what he said?
Yes. He said that he is the most wonderful pastor, that he is handsomer than you, that he's better looking than you, and that he can preach better than you.
Now I understand. Now I understand why everyone laughed.
I'll try.
All right,
Ya
it's
sé
good to
por
be
qué estaba
here today.
riendo.
It's good to be here today.
Es una bendición estar aquí.
I want to talk a little bit about Julio
Yo quiero hablar un poquito acerca de Julio.
and explain kind of the unseen struggles that church planners face.
Y yo quiero hablar un poquito acerca de los diferentes problemas que algunas personas encaran cuando están plantando una iglesia.
I'm going to sit down in just a minute and give him the rest of my time or the rest of our time
Yo me voy a sentar en un instante y voy a dejar que Julio continúe.
because I really want you to hear him and feel his heart.
Porque yo quiero que lo escuchen, yo quiero que escuchen el corazón de él.
He probably has the biggest heart for God of anyone I've been around in years.
Tal vez él tiene uno de los corazones para el Señor más grandes que yo he experimentado en mucho tiempo.
And at this juncture in his ministry,
Y en este lugar donde él está en su ministerio,
he's trying to raise support for his family to live in Kodak and be in the ministry there at 24/7 Church.
él ahorita está levantando el apoyo económico para que él y su familia puedan estar en nuestra iglesia 24/7 en la ciudad de Kodak, en el estado de Tennessee.
Seems like it takes you longer to say what I say.
Don't worry, it's fine. We got it.
You let me know. So, when we get commissioned to plant a church,
Cuando nosotros somos comisionados para plantar una iglesia,
we go on itinerant.
nosotros vamos en itinerario.
And we travel from church to church to church to church to church.
Y nosotros vamos de iglesia en iglesia en iglesia,
One more.
en iglesia.
Yes. And we ask people to help support us financially.
Y nosotros le pedimos a la gente que nos ayude económicamente.
So when you go to English-speaking churches in Tennessee, in the South,
Cuando usted va a las iglesias que hablan solamente inglés en el sur, por ejemplo en Tennessee,
they aren't as receptive to give money to someone that they suspicion might not even be legal.
a veces no ayudan mucho, sobre todo con algunas personas que ellos piensan que a lo mejor no están aquí legalmente en este país.
So when he walks in, there's already walls built up.
Entonces cuando él entra a estas iglesias ya hay cierta resistencia.
Then he'll share his heart and he'll ask people to write down their check routing number on this card.
Entonces él comparte el corazón, ellos comparten el corazón de ellos y ellos les piden que llenen esa tarjeta y donde pongan su cheque para el apoyo de él.
Who thinks that's going to work out very well?
¿Quién piensa usted que eso va a funcionar? ¿Cuántas iglesias lo van a apoyar a él así?
Yes, not going to.
No va a trabajar,
But he has done very well so
pero lo ha
far.
hecho muy bien hasta ahora.
And we're very proud of what he has put forth and the efforts he has done in getting some support raised.
Y nosotros estamos contentos con lo que se ha logrado hasta ahora, con los esfuerzos que ha hecho y con los fondos que ya ha empezado a recoger.
But I want to ask you as his brother and friend,
Yo le
would you
quiero pedir
consider,
como su pastor, que soy como su hermano y como su amigo,
would you consider today to fill out a card and help him monthly plant a church in Kodak, Tennessee?
ustedes estarían dispuestos a ayudarlo, a llenar una tarjeta y asegurarse de que él pueda ir a plantar esta iglesia, este ministerio hispano en la iglesia de Kodak allá en Tennessee.
I do not know another church planter or another person that's worthy
Yo no conozco a otro misionero ahorita o otra persona que esté plantando una iglesia ahorita,
everywhere we go in town.
que donde quiera que nosotros vamos,
He's greeting people.
él está conociendo
Oh,
personas.
hello.
Él va y platica con todo el mundo, el mismo va y habla
Español.
con todos. Sí,
Yeah.
sí, ¿me entiendes?
And he's connecting with them,
Haciendo conexiones con ellos
sharing God's love with each person.
y compartiendo el amor de Dios con ellos, con cada persona.
I've seen him with my own eyes.
Yo lo he visto con mis propios ojos.
I have felt his heart.
Yo he experimentado su corazón,
I've heard him pray.
yo lo he escuchado a él orar,
And I know he is not selfish.
y yo sé que él no es egoísta,
He's only wanting to do God's will.
él solamente quiere hacer la obra de Dios, la voluntad de Dios.
My family, my wife and me,
Yo, mi familia, mi esposa,
were the first ones to fill out a card
fuimos los primeros en llenar una tarjeta y apoyar.
because I believe in him.
Porque yo creo en eso, yo creo en él.
I ask you today to fill out a card.
Yo les pido hoy que hagan eso, que se comprometan a ayudarlo.
And if you're not afraid, put the routing number on.
Y si no tienen miedo de poner allí
So
el
every
número de
month-
su cheque
so-
para que cada mes,
Yeah, so every month you can count on your support.
para que cada mes él esté seguro de que tiene ese apoyo cada mes de parte de usted.
We have cards here that are in Spanish and English.
Tenemos algunas tarjetas aquí en inglés y en español.
And if you don't come get one afterwards, I will see you.
Y si no viene a agarrar una, yo me voy a asegurar que agarre una.
So I ask you to please consider supporting him monthly.
Yo les pido que consideren eso, ayudarlo económicamente cada mes.
I want him to share with you his testimony, how he came to America and what he left. I don't, maybe you can share that and tell them.
Yo quiero que comparta él su testimonio, cómo dejó, lo que dejó allá en Colombia y lo que está haciendo aquí.
And I believe when he's finished, you will feel his heartbeat as well.
Y yo espero que cuando él termine, yo creo que usted va a experimentar el corazón que tiene para el Señor. Thank you, Pastor.
Para empezar, no merezco que él haya dicho todo lo que he escuchado.
To begin with, I don't deserve everything that he said about me.
Solo quiero dar la gloria al Señor
I just want to give
por
the
esto.
glory to God for everything that he said.
Pues mi nombre es Julio Jiménez, vengo del hermoso país de Colombia.
I am Julio Jimenez, and I'm from the beautiful country of Colombia.
Esta es la foto de mi familia, mi esposa y mis dos hijos.
This is the picture of my family, my wife, and my two kids.
Hemos escuchado el llamado de Dios directo en nuestro corazón para estar en esta nación.
We had heard the call of the Lord in our hearts to be in this nation and to do His work.
En Norteamérica, en nuestro estado, en Tennessee, hay una iglesia en cada esquina americana.
Where we live, in our state where we live at, in Tennessee, and over there, there's a church almost in every corner.
El 99% son iglesias de habla inglesa, no español.
And 99% of those churches, they only speak English.
Pero la población en esta área es más del 60% de habla hispana.
But in this area, the area that we are right now, almost 60% of the population, they speak Spanish.
En la escuela, el 52% de la población estudiantil es de habla hispana.
And the public school and the local school, 52% of the children there are Spanish speaking.
Entonces hay una necesidad de que esta comunidad conozca de Jesús.
So there's a need in this community for them to know the Lord.
Y sabe algo, nosotros estuvimos pastoreando en Colombia por 18 años junto a mi familia.
We were pastoring in Colombia for 19 years with my family.
Y en un momento Dios habla a nuestro corazón y nos mueve a esta nación.
And there's a moment in which the Lord talked to our heart and He brings us over here to this country.
Jeremías capítulo 29, en el versículo 11, Dios habla al pueblo y dice que sus planes son mejores que nuestros planes.
The prophet Jeremiah says that His plans are better than our plans.
Y por eso aceptamos su plan en vez del nuestro.
And that's why we accepted His plans instead of ours.
Tuvimos que dejar todo en nuestro país
We left everything behind in our country
sin decir adiós.
without even saying goodbye.
Solo veníamos 2 meses nada más.
We only came for 2 months only.
Y llevamos 1 año y 4 meses aquí.
Now we had spent a year and 4 months here.
Hemos tenido un respaldo de Dios para mi familia.
We have experienced the support of the Lord for our family.
Pero hay una intención en nuestro corazón de trabajar para la comunidad hispana.
But there is a purpose in our heart to work in the Hispanic community in our state.
Es necesario.
It is needed.
¿Sabe por qué?
You know why?
Ellos vienen a esta nación en busca de oportunidades.
Because those Hispanics that are coming to this country, they're coming looking for an opportunity.
Vienen buscando una mejor vida, un mejor estatus social, un mejor trabajo.
They're coming looking for a better job, a better opportunity for them.
Muchos de ellos vienen huyendo de sus países.
Many of them, they're coming as refugees, escaping the chaos in their countries.
Pero lo que ellos no saben es que Dios está permitiendo esto para que le conozcan.
But at the end, maybe they don't know that the Lord is allowing all of this for them, maybe for them to know Him.
Vienen a esta nación huyendo de muchas cosas, pero aquí necesitan encontrarse con Jesús.
They may be coming from many countries, escaping something in their countries, but over here, they could find the Lord, and they could trust in Him.
Por eso necesitamos a la iglesia.
That's why we need the church.
Ahí debe estar la iglesia presente.
The church has to be there, present.
Dejamos a nuestras familias por hacer la obra de Dios en este lugar.
We left our families to come and do the work of the Lord here in this country.
¿Sabe? Estábamos en el mejor momento de nuestra vida como pastores y familia.
And we were doing very good over there. We were at the best moment in our ministry and in our families.
No pensábamos nunca en el sueño americano.
And we never thought about the American dream.
Queríamos cumplir el sueño de Dios.
We just wanted to do God's dream for us.
Y eso es lo que hemos estado haciendo.
And that's what we were doing right now.
Quisiera mostrarles algunas fotografías con mi clicker mágico.
I'm going to use my magic clicker so you can
Okay,
see some
next,
pictures.
please. Okay.
La próxima.
Yeah, okay. Funciona.
Yeah, look, it works.
Okay.
It works.
Nos enfrentamos a muchos retos cuando llegamos a esta nación.
We faced many challenges when we got here.
El gran reto para nosotros, venir de otro país, los documentos.
One of the biggest challenges was to be here legally.
Le dijimos al Señor, no queremos estar ahí de mala manera, queremos estar bien trabajando para ti, así que apóyanos en nuestros documentos.
We told the Lord we want to be here and we want to do things right. So Lord, please open that door for us to be here legally.
¿Y sabe qué?
And you know what?
Dios nos aprobó nuestros documentos.
They give us our visa, so we are here legally.
Tuvimos nuestra visa en muy poco tiempo
We obtain our visas in a very short period of time.
y dijimos sí a Dios.
And we say yes to the Lord.
Cuando decimos sí a Dios,
When we say yes to the Lord,
entonces Dios dice sí a
and
nosotros.
then He says yes
Amén.
to us. Amen.
Es así como funciona.
This is how it works.
Gloria a Jesús.
This is how it works. You say yes to the Lord, He will say yes to you.
Ese es nuestro Dios.
That is our God.
Next. Funciona. Esa no es la mía.
There we go.
Ok. Vamos a esperar un momentico. Quiero mostrarles algunas fotos de lo que ha pasado en este tiempo.
I just want to show you, we share with you a few pictures of
Ok,
what's
¿puedes poner
going
la
on.
próxima?
Next, Pastor, please.
Ok, hemos estado trabajando con la comunidad hispana desde que llegamos.
We have been working with the Hispanic community since we got here.
Hemos estado visitando muchas familias,
We have been visiting different families,
tocando sus puertas,
knocking at the doors,
al estilo latinoamericano,
and or Latin American style,
tocando la puerta y decir, hola,
and talking at the door and saying hi.
¿hablan español?
Do you speak Spanish?
Ok, recíbanos.
Oh, please let us come in.
Hemos podido congregar 4 a 5 familias.
We have been able to congregate 4 or 5 families already.
Hemos podido formar en una iglesia en la comunidad en Johnson City
We have been able to congregate in Johnson City.
equipos de alabanza para las congregaciones.
We have been able to assemble different worship teams.
Soy pedagogo musical
My strong is music.
y en Colombia trabajaba como consultor académico.
I will work as an academic consultant in Colombia.
Mi esposa lideraba alabanza.
And my wife, she was a worship leader.
Mi hijo mayor toca la batería.
My oldest son, he plays the drums.
Mi hijo menor trabaja en todo el multimedia.
And my younger son, he does multimedia.
Entonces dijimos, hay que poner todo esto al servicio de la comunidad.
So I said to all of them, you know what, let's work together and put all of this at the disposal of the local church.
Y estuvimos trabajando allí, formando equipos de alabanza en las congregaciones.
So we were able to form different worship teams.
También tuvimos la oportunidad de acudir a hospitales.
we were able to go and help in different hospitals.
Saben, la comunidad hispana necesita mucha ayuda.
You know, the Hispanic community, they need a lot of work. They need a lot of help.
Mucha ayuda.
A lot of help.
Y no solo le estoy hablando de dinero.
And I'm not talking about just money.
Ayer hablaba el pastor Moody acerca de los problemas que tiene la gente con depresión, ansiedades.
Like Pastor Moody was saying yesterday, all the issues that people are dealing right now with depression and mental issues.
Necesitamos entrenarnos para acudir y poder dar ayuda a ellos.
We need to train ourselves to go and provide the help.
Entonces le repito, no es solo dinero.
It's not only money.
Necesitan también alguien que escuche
They need somebody to listen
y que
to
les
them.
presente a Jesús.
And that person that is going to listen to them, that person has to represent the
Déjenme
Lord.
contarles un momentico esta historia.
Let me just tell you a little bit about the story.
Junto al pastor Miguel Pineda en Johnson City,
In Johnson City with Pastor Miguel Pineda,
nos invitaron a visitar a una persona que tuvo un accidente en su automóvil.
we went and visited a person that had been involved in a car accident.
Muy triste porque él venía de vacaciones solo por 2 semanas.
That person, he was coming just in a vacation trip.
Y
only
del
for 2 weeks.
aeropuerto a su casa sufrieron este accidente en su automóvil.
And from the airport to their house, they were involved in this car accident.
Él salió disparado de su carro
He on the accident, he flew out of the car.
y tuvo un accidente muy grave.
It was a very serious accident.
Nos pidieron que los visitáramos, no los conocíamos.
We didn't know them, but they asked us to go and visit them at the hospital.
Pero escuche, ahí debe estar la iglesia.
But at the hospital, that's where the church should be.
Ese es el corazón de la iglesia,
That is the heart of the church.
estar allí.
Be there.
No lo conocemos,
We don't know the person,
pero él necesita conocer a Jesús.
but he needs to know the Lord.
Y fuimos y nos dijeron, ok, pueden entrar, pero no pueden cantar alto.
They say, well, you can come into the room, but you cannot sing too loud in the room.
Yo llevaba mi guitarra conmigo.
Because I brought my guitar with me.
Dijimos, es una buena oportunidad para adorar.
And I said, this is a good time to worship the Lord.
Y empezamos a cantar.
And we start singing.
Y decimos, cuán grande es Dios.
And we were singing, how great is our God.
Muy despacio,
Very, very, very soft.
para que no nos sacaran del
So
hospital.
they won't kick us out of the hospital.
En 5 minutos después,
5
cuán
minutes
grande es Dios.
We were getting louder and louder.
10 minutos,
10
cuán
minutes later,
grande.
we were worshiping.
No nos pudimos contener de la emoción
We couldn't control ourselves.
y tuvimos que cantar más alto.
So we have to sing louder.
Terminamos llorando en esa habitación. La mamá de este chico lloraba mucho.
The mom of the accident victim, she was crying.
Pastor Miguel estuvo orando por esta persona
And Pastor Miguel was praying over the
y
person.
salimos de la habitación
When we got out of the hospital,
muy contentos.
we were rejoicing.
Y en la puerta del hospital,
And at the door of the hospital,
los médicos estaban así.
the doctors were like this.
Les dijimos que no cantaran fuerte,
And they told us, we told you not to sing too loud.
pero no importa. ¿Quieren saber algo?
But it doesn't matter. You want to know something?
El doctor nos dijo, las otras habitaciones también estuvieron cantando con ustedes.
The other rooms that were singing with you guys too.
Ahí debe estar la iglesia.
That's the place where the church should be.
Ese es el corazón de la iglesia.
That is the heart of the church.
Dios no es hispano,
God, He's not Hispanic,
Dios no es americano,
and He's not American.
Dios es Dios.
God is God,
Y Él tiene un plan, dar su Hijo por nosotros.
and He had a plan to give His Son for us.
¿Estás cumpliendo el plan de Dios?
Are you doing His plan?
Por eso queremos ser parte de las manos de Dios en esta nación.
That's why we want to be part of the team here. We want to be the hands of the Lord here in this country.
Conocimos a estas 2 personas,
We met these 2 persons.
el pastor Chad Kivette y su familia y el pastor Marcus Stephens y su familia.
We met Pastor Chad Kivette and his family and Pastor Marcus Stephen and his family.
Dios empezó a enrutarnos y al conocerlos nos dijeron, estamos orando hace 2 años por una pareja de pastores para iniciar un proyecto en español.
And then he told us, we have been praying for a couple of Hispanic pastors to come and help us in our church. For 2 years, we have been praying.
Y dijimos,
somebody.
¿qué necesitan?
And we told, what do you need?
¿A ustedes?
And he said, we need you.
Ok, tenemos que orar, vamos a empezar.
And he said, okay, let's start praying.
Empezamos a conocer a toda la iglesia y los hemos amado en muy poco tiempo.
We start meeting the whole congregation, the whole church, and we fell in love with all of them.
Y empezamos a visitar familias alrededor de la iglesia.
And we start visiting different families around the church.
Nos sorprendimos que hay muchos hispanos alrededor de la
We
iglesia.
find out that around the church there's a lot of Hispanics.
Y descubrimos un punto de concentración, las tiendas hispanas.
And we find a place where everybody get together, the Hispanic stores.
Para mis compañeros hispanos de aquí saben que en una tienda hispana hay muchos hispanos.
We know that in a Hispanic grocery store, there's going to be a lot of Hispanics.
¿Por qué? Porque estamos buscando nuestra comida.
Why? Because we're looking for our food.
Los alimentos que se parecen a nuestro país.
Something that is similar to what we eat in our country.
Y bueno, allí nos pusimos en contacto con algunas familias.
Well, that's the place where we make a lot of connections with
Y
different
empezamos a
families.
hablar con ellas y a decirles, oye, vamos a empezar un proyecto en español. ¿Quieren?
And we were able to share and invite them to come and be part of this Hispanic
Y ellos
project.
dijeron, claro que sí, no hay una iglesia en español aquí en Kodak.
And many of them say, yes, of course, we want to be part of that because there's not a Hispanic church here in Kodak.
Dijimos, ahora sabemos por qué Dios nos trajo hasta acá.
And then I said, now I know why the Lord brought me here.
Hicimos nuestra primera reunión de conexión en agosto.
And in the month of August, we have our first connection service.
Y estos son los resultados de esa
And these are
primera
the
reunión.
results of that meeting. Yeah, I got it good. Dios es bueno, Julio.
Sí.
Dios es bueno.
Jesús dejó su trono para morir por nosotros.
Jesus left his throne so he can come and die for us.
Él tuvo que dejar todo.
He left everything.
Lo que yo dejé no es nada en comparación a lo que Él ha dejado.
What I left home, everything that I left home, it will never compare to everything that he left.
Pero Pedro dice que si nos humillamos bajo su mano, llegará el momento donde Él nos exaltará.
But the Apostle Peter says that we humble ourselves, he will lift us.
Cuando hacemos el plan de Dios y decimos sí a Dios, Él nos dice sí a nosotros.
When we accept God's plan and we say yes to the Lord, he will say yes.
Mejor su plan
His plan is always better than
que
yours.
los nuestros.
Always.
Amén.
Amen.
Esta reunión congregamos
On this meeting,
ok, aquí está mi hijo a mano izquierda, Santiago.
on the left, that's my son Santiago.
Ese día asistieron 3 niños y
On
él
that
tuvo
day-
que cuidar a esos 3
On
niños.
that day, he had to take care of 3 kids that came for that meeting.
Ok, next. Este es el resultado de la reunión.
This is the results of that meeting.
30 personas en total.
Altogether, 30 people came.
Saben, es difícil empezar.
You know, it's very difficult to start something new.
Es muy difícil.
It's really hard.
La mayoría hemos pasado por esto.
And I think most of us have experienced that.
Pero si Dios está en control,
But if God is in control,
va a funcionar.
it's going to work.
Va a funcionar.
It will work.
15 personas nuevas.
50 new people.
Una persona recibe a Jesús en su corazón ese día.
One got saved that day
En la primera reunión.
on the first meeting.
Déjenme contarle rápidamente. A esta persona la conocimos en un McDonald's el mismo día de la reunión.
Well, let me share to you. We met that person the same day at the local McDonald's.
Fuimos a almorzar y la compartimos de Cristo a ella.
We went to have breakfast and we shared the gospel with that person.
Le dijimos, te invitamos a una reunión hoy en la tarde.
And he said, you know, by the way, we're going to have our first meeting this afternoon.
Dijo, pero no tengo un carro para ir.
And he said, well, I don't have no way to get to that place.
No importa, te recogemos.
I said, no, it doesn't matter. We're going to pick you up.
Vive a 15 minutos de la iglesia.
She lived 15 minutes away from the church.
Fuimos por ella.
We went and got her.
¿Sabe?
You know something?
Ella recibió a Jesús en su
She
corazón
received
ese
the
día.
Lord in her heart that day.
Y ya ha ido 2 veces a las reuniones con nosotros.
And in the minutes that we have, she had been there 2 times already.
Y ahora llevó a su novio también a la próxima reunión.
Now she brought the next meeting. She brought her boyfriend.
Ahora hemos alcanzado 2 personas más.
Now we have reached 2 more people.
Recuerde,
Remember
si es el
something.
plan de
If
Dios,
it is God's plan,
si dice sí al plan de Dios,
if you say yes to His plan,
Dios hará lo demás.
He will do the rest.
4 americanos estuvieron en esa reunión con nosotros.
4 English-speaking people, Americans, were there in our reunion.
La iglesia americana apoyándonos también.
They had helped us so much.
Estuvieron ahí orando con
They
nosotros,
were praying for us.
sirviendo con nosotros.
They were serving with us.
Eso fue hermoso verlo.
That is beautiful.
Esa es la iglesia.
That is the church.
Amén.
Amen.
Por último,
And lastly,
quiero que quede en su memoria esta foto.
I just want you to remember and for this picture to be in your memory.
Aquí no hay solo una nación.
There's not only one nation here.
Aquí no se trata de un solo idioma o una bandera.
We're just not talking about one flag or one language.
Esto no se trata del color o del vestido.
We're not talking about the skin color or how you dress.
Todo se trata de Jesús.
Everything is about
De
Jesus.
Jesús
Just about
De
Jesus.
Jesús.
Just about Jesus.
en nuestros
In
corazones.
our hearts.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
All right, real quick. I'm only going to take about 30 seconds,
Rapidito, 30 segundos.
maybe a minute.
A lo mejor un minuto.
I forget it's going to take twice as long.
Un poco nada más.
Everyone in here,
Cada uno de los que están aquí,
I imagine you spend a few dollars a month eating out,
yo creo que nos gastamos varios dólares cuando salimos a comer al mes
and most of the time you only get indigestion.
y muchas de las veces lo que agarramos es una indigestión.
If you would take that money and sacrifice eating out once a month,
Si usted sacrifica el ir a salir a comer una vez al mes
invest in what you just heard. Who would not want to be a part of that?
y vamos a invertir en esta obra.
I don't want to miss an opportunity to invest in a soul being saved.
Yo no quiero perder la oportunidad de poder invertir en la salvación de una persona.
I promise you he will be preaching Jesus. I promise.
Yo le prometo a usted, él va a estar predicando Jesucristo.
Who would not want to support a man like this that you know is going to preach Jesus to hundreds and thousands of people?
¿Quién no quiere ayudar a una persona, a un hombre como este, llamado por Dios, que va a predicar a Jesucristo y es solo Jesucristo?
So you have an opportunity when you leave today to get with him, fill out a card, turn it back into him. Don't take it home and pray about it. You'll forget it and you won't do it. You won't pray about it. I know.
Al final de la reunión usted se puede llevar esta tarjeta, pero no se lo lleve a su casa y diga voy a orar en la casa, porque no lo va a hacer. Decida ahorita ayudarnos.
When the Holy Spirit speaks to you now, and I know he has, some of
Porque el
you, I
Espíritu
know,
Santo le está hablando ahorita y yo sé que le está hablando a algunos de ustedes.
do what he's leading you to do today.
Haga lo que el Espíritu Santo le está diciendo a usted que haga.
Do not let the devil talk you out of it.
No deje que el enemigo le haga que cambie de opinión.
Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
I want to, by the way, Chad Kivette is a church planner. He's on his third church plant right now. And for those of you who don't know him, that's who he is. We know now who Pastor Julio is. And I hope you never forget what we've heard today.
Espero que no se les olvide que escuchamos ahora. Si no conocían al pastor Chad Kivette, él es un plantador de iglesias. Esta es la tercera iglesia que él ha plantado. Y ahora ya conocen a Julio y espero que no se les olvide.
We are also blessed to have church planter Stephen Schmidt from Arizona. He and his wife Amanda are here with their two children. Stephen, would you please introduce yourself and tell us where you are?
Tenemos a otro plantador de iglesias, al hermano Stephen Schmidt, y él viene del estado de Arizona, donde están comenzando una obra nueva.
Yeah, I'm Steve Schmidt. My wife Amanda is over here in the back in the green.
Amanda, stand up.
Esta es mi esposa, Amanda, y mis hijos.
This is my children, Judah and Skylar.
Estos son mis hijos, es Judas y Skylar.
We started church planting back in 2019 in Albuquerque,
Nosotros comenzamos una iglesia en la ciudad de Albuquerque, Nuevo México,
and God has recently moved us to Casa Grande, Arizona.
y ahora el Señor nos ha movido a la ciudad de Casa Grande en el estado de Arizona.
Lo siento, Casa Grande.
Oh, es Casa Grande, sí. He's trying, he's learning.
And so we just started there. We moved there in, keep saying April, but I think that was May 20th is actually when we moved there.
Empezamos, en realidad nos movimos allí en el mes de mayo.
And we are really excited. Casa Grande is about 75% non-religious.
En esta comunidad donde estamos ahora es aproximadamente un 75% de la población no son religiosos.
And it has grown 115% in population in the last 20 years.
En los últimos 20 años ha crecido más del 115% en población.
So we are very excited about starting there, and we have our first community Bible group starting in January.
En enero vamos a comenzar nuestra primera reunión de estudio bíblico para la comunidad en el mes de enero.
So if you could pray for us, we would appreciate it. As
Ore por nosotros, por favor, se los agradecemos sus oraciones de antemano. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Gracias. Muchas gracias.
I'm going to throw, I'm on a roll today.
Ya,
just so you
vamos
know.
a seguir porque ya comenzamos y vamos a seguir.
So at 10:15,
A las 10:15.
I know we're getting ready to have 2 sessions right now,
Yo sé que estamos listos para tener 2 sesiones ahorita.
but at 10:15, we need to all gather together
A las 10:15 tenemos que juntarnos todos
because Lord willing, our worship leader,
porque vamos a tener aquí a nuestro líder de alabanza.
she just had a baby 4 weeks ago.
Ella apenas acaba de tener su bebé hace
And
4 semanas.
She and her husband are going to be here to lead us in just a couple of praise and worship songs.
Aquí, entonces van a estar aquí, nos van a ayudar con algunas alabanzas.
It won't take very long,
No va a tomar mucho tiempo.
but that's what we're going to do at
Es lo que vamos a
10:15.
hacer a las 10:15.
So right now,
En este momento,
Brother Sam McVay,
el hermano Sam McVay,
he will be going upstairs on this side.
aquí en este lado, pues sigan al hermano Sam, aquí va a tener su clase.
He will be teaching in Spanish.
Él va a estar dando un seminario en español.
And so we'll go ahead and have all our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters go with Brother Sam McVay. Again, you could go through this door and
Y luego arriba,
upstairs.
el lugar donde te enseñé Sam. Ujú.
And
Pueden seguir al hermano Sam.
then we'll have Brad Ransom come.
Y vamos a tener al hermano Brad Ransom aquí.
He's going to talk about systems.
Él va a hablar acerca de los sistemas. Ok, síganme, mis hermanos.
Well, good morning again, everyone. We are just delighted to be back today, and we are going to have some of these breakout sessions. And so I have an hour's worth of material to give you in 33 minutes. So buckle up, hang on tight, and we're going to go, all right? We'll have a good time. I am excited to be here. I didn't say this last night because I always feel like we're short on time, but I do want you to know I am originally from California. I grew up in Southern California in Orange County, and I am a product of this state when I was a child, and went to the Free Baptist Church in Garden Grove, California. Edwin Wade was my childhood pastor and was very influential in my family's life and in my life, and so I ended up going to Hillsdale College in Oklahoma because that's where Brother Wade, as many of you know that know him, went later in his ministry. And so then got involved in ministry in Oklahoma and ended up staying there for 33 years. Never dreamed I would spend my life and my ministry in the Midwest and in the South, but spent 33 years in Oklahoma. And then the last 10 years, I've been in Nashville working for North American Ministries. And God has just been so good and has just showed himself so mighty and powerful in so many ways. And God has just allowed me to do some incredible things through my ministry. I was involved in 3 fantastic churches in my pastoral ministry, 2 as an associate staff pastor, 1 in Oklahoma City and then 1 in Ada, Oklahoma, before I went to the First Free Baptist Church of Sulphur, Oklahoma, to pastor as the lead pastor for 13 years. Then I served for 6.5 years as the state mission director in Oklahoma, which was a full-time position at that time, in fundraising for our support program, as well as helping start churches in Oklahoma. And then, like I said, 10 years ago, and it's always a very nostalgic time because I was actually coming to your state meeting in Fresno 10 years ago, and I was the state mission director. Actually, it's been 11 years ago when I was the state mission director in Oklahoma, and we had began doing some church revitalization, and you guys had invited me to come and share at your state meeting. I was driving over the grapevine from my in-laws' house in Los Angeles, was driving here when I got a phone call from an unknown 615, which is Nashville, area code, and answered the phone, and it was David Crow on the other end, and he offered me my job that I have now. So I was on my way to the California State meeting, so it's always a little nostalgic and kind of fun to drive over the grapevine and think about that, because God has just done so much in the last few years. And one of the things that he's done throughout the 33 years that I served in pastoral ministry, and then the last 17 years that I've been serving in denominational leadership, has just taught me so much. that's too many years. But 33 years total in Oklahoma, that's what it was, so it wasn't all in that order. I'm not that old. So anyway, what God has done in the last 40 years, I have been in ministry now for just over 40 years. God has taught me so much and has allowed me to be, as I said, just involved in some incredible churches. And one of the things that has just always been on my heart and my mind, and something that I've been trying to figure out, is creating healthy church systems. And what I mean by that, we'll kind of get into in this session. But really, I think that there is a underlying kind of current or understanding that we have to have about church, because we oftentimes just think about church as the programs that we have and the ministries that we do and all of the stuff that we see that's on top. But there's so much more than that. And I once had a guy ask me, who was not Free Will Baptist, but he asked me, he said, why is it that Free Will Baptist churches are all small? And I said, well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know, comparatively to churches, we are a pretty small churches in denomination. We're not really a small denomination. We're considered actually a medium-sized denomination. But we have a lot of small churches. And I think that one of the things, and don't pretend to have all the answers or have it all figured out, but I think one of the big problems that a lot of churches have, and it's not just Free Will Baptist churches, but many churches, is our structure. And I think we structure ourselves a lot of times to remain the size that we are, and we never really structure ourselves for growth. And I think that's a health issue that we need to talk about in the church. So we're going to talk about creating healthy church systems. I also will do a shameless plug here and tell you I have a book by that title coming out in March. Randall House is publishing my first, probably my only book. I don't know if I have anything else in me, but it's a tough process, I'll just tell you. If you've ever written a book, it is not easy. So if you have the opportunity, we'd love for you to get the book, and it will unpack a lot of this a lot better, because I'm just going to have time to scratch the surface. But we know that the condition of the church in America is not good, in that statistically they say that 80 to 90% of churches are in decline, and that's across all denominations and across all kinds of churches. And they say of the 10 to 20% that are either plateaued or growing, most of that is due to transfer growth. And so, in other words, the church down the street from yours has a better kids program, and so families from your church go because they want something for their kids. And then next year, the church down the road from them has, a great dynamic worship leader, and they have great worship music, and so a bunch of people go to that church, and it's just kind of, shuffling people around and just moving people around. It's not that churches are really winning new people or making disciples, but they're just kind of moving the sheep around, if you will. And so of those churches that are growing, a lot of them are only growing because of that transfer. In fact, some of the people at Exponential, which is a research group, and they do a big conference every year, but some of the leaders at Exponential say that as little as 2% of churches in America are actually growing because of discipleship, growing because of new conversion. And so the thing is that many churches, I believe, are sick, and they don't know it. They don't realize that they have deep-seated problems. I don't have time to go into great detail, but back in 2000, the National Convention was here in California, in Anaheim. And we were here for the convention. My in-laws lived in Los Angeles at the time, so we were staying with them. And on Wednesday night of the service, I stood up for the invitation, and it was like somebody stabbed me in the gut with a hot knife. I mean, I had extreme pain in my gut. And like I said, long story short, ended up in the emergency room that night. They ran some tests, said they saw some possible problems, but I needed more tests, and they needed to put me in the hospital. And I said, man, I live, in Oklahoma, and I really don't want to go in the hospital here, and I'd rather get home. So they said, we'll give you some medicine, we'll do some things to get you comfortable, and we'll try to get you home. So they did, and their plan was for me to get in the car and drive home the next day. Well, I was feeling better, so we ended up staying a few more days. Bad idea. But anyway, I got really sick again. Finally got back home and didn't even make it home. Stopped at the hospital, went to the emergency room. They checked me in, started running tests, and found out I had colon cancer. And so I had surgery and 6 months of chemo. I mean, all of this happened just like so fast. But the reason I tell you that story and the reason that it's important is because here I was, for the doctor said probably 2 years I'd had this tumor. I didn't know I was sick. But it wasn't until I had such extreme symptoms that it actually, like, literally stopped me in my tracks. And I think that's where a lot of churches are today. There are all kinds of underlying issues and problems that churches have, but they either ignore it, and looking back, I had symptoms for at least a couple of months before I got sick, really sick. I had symptoms, but I didn't recognize them, and they weren't bad enough that it made me really just stop and, really contemplate, hey, something serious is going on here. So it wasn't until I ended up in the emergency room that I realized something was really bad wrong. And praise the Lord, I'm great. I'm cancer-free 23 years, and God is my healer, and I'm so thankful for that. But it's just important. Thank you. I appreciate that. And many of you prayed for me, I know. I had people all over the world that prayed for me, and God has just showed himself so mighty through that whole story. But again, I share that because that's the way that I think a lot of churches are. Churches are very sick, and they've been sick for a long time, but they just haven't gotten to the point to where they realize where they are. So there's a very important element that I want to talk about, again, very briefly, just to skim it, because I want to get into the real meat of this in just a second. But there's a lot of underlying things that we don't see. Just like when you're building a house, there is a foundation that you can't see. It's covered up, right? It's got concrete and steel and rock and all that kind of thing, and it all gets buried. You spend thousands, tens of thousands of dollars before you ever can build the pretty stuff that you get to see on the outside. And so is the same way with church structure. There's all kinds of hidden elements that people don't normally see, such as spiritual elements. And spiritual elements include the prayer, the fasting, the spiritual warfare. And we all know that those things are absolutely essential for church health. And please don't misunderstand all the rest that I'm going to say, because I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts, okay? But none of the nuts and bolts are important if the spiritual element is missing. So you've got to spend time on your face before God. You've got to spend time praying and fasting and searching what it is that God has for your church and all that. And be prepared for the backlash, the spiritual warfare. The devil will not like it if your church gets serious about making disciples. The devil will not like it if your church is hurting people in your community. And he is going to attack you and your family and your church more than he ever has before. And so if you're serious about this stuff, you better get ready, because I promise you it'll come. So there's all that spiritual elements that are underlined. But then there's the mechanical elements, or things that I call mechanical elements. So there's all the legal documents, like your incorporation, your constitution and bylaws, your tax-exempt status, and all those kinds of things. Again, those are underlying things that we don't give a lot of thought to, but need to be in place. And so our constitution and bylaws are one thing that I encourage churches that if you're wanting to make some changes and do some things in your church to make it easier to reach people and that sort of thing, you need to look at all that stuff. Most pastors don't even know where a copy of their church constitution and bylaws are. They know they're in that drawer somewhere, but they never look at them and they never read them. And most churches don't follow their own legal documents. They have clauses and all kinds of things in their constitution and bylaws that they haven't done for years, or they don't do it that way anymore, or whatever. So I just encourage you to go back and look at all that stuff, update it. Those are living documents. They are intended to grow and to change with your church, and we'll get into more of that as we look at this. So those are the mechanical elements. And then there's also the important element of church assessment. We need to understand where we're starting. And so we need to do a very thorough church assessment. This is where Refresh, NAM, and the executive office work together with Dr. Dwyer and the Rekindle program. They have a great health assessment for your church, and we encourage you to take advantage of that. But really what our church health assessment is just going through everything that your church does and everything that your church is. It starts by walking in the building, before you get to the building. It starts when you look at your website and your social media, but it also is when you come into your parking lot and you look at your signage and your building and you look at your facilities and notice all of the things that we don't typically notice. We need to do all of those kinds of facility assessments so that we can see things through the eyes of a guest. When a guest walks into your building for the first time, what are they going to see? What do they experience? And we need to look at things through their eyes, not through our eyes. We know the building. We know where everything is. We know we know we don't have enough storage, and that's why we have chairs stacked up, in the hallway or whatever. But guests don't know that. They come in and it just looks, like nobody cares. So we've got to do those facility assessments. But then also leadership assessments, that's tough. It's really tough. But we need to make sure we have the right leaders in the right place, serving in the right ministries. We need to do assessment of our worship services. Most of the time, our worship services are very much designed for us. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing because the church is here to edify the believer and to build us up and to instruct the saints and all that. That is perfectly fine. But if your church is like, somebody comes in and you're speaking a foreign language because they don't get anything that's going on, you stand up when just because it's time to stand up, and you sit down and you do all these ritualistic things and they have no idea what's going on, then that can be very off-putting to guests and people that might come in and not really have church as their context. And so they leave feeling like they've been in some kind of a lodge meeting where there was a secret language and a secret code. And we talk about things that they don't understand. They don't understand things like being washed in the blood. Sounds kind of gross, doesn't it, if you think about it like that? Or we talk about, all these theological words. And preachers, one of the worst things that you can say in a sermon is, well, you know the story. No, they don't. New people and people that have no biblical context, they don't know the story. And that's a challenge for me. I say it all the time. And I always, still to this day, I'll try not to do it tomorrow, Mike, but when I preach, I say, well, maybe you don't know the story, so let me tell you real quickly what that story's about. And so if we're, we just have to assess all that kind of stuff, and it starts with us as the pastor, the leader. And then like I said, our worship services, our ministries, everything that we do, we've got to assess all that. We need to assess our mission, vision, and core values. Do we even know what that stuff is? I don't have time to get into that. But if we focus on health, then growth will start to happen naturally. It's not a fix-all. It's not a magic bullet. It's not going to, transform your church overnight. But it builds the foundation so that you can build upon that to do the other stuff. So let's get back to the idea of systems, because systems, by definition, is individual structural components that are working together to function as a whole. Now, I'll pause and let you digest that for a second, because I know that's a new thought maybe for some of you, but it's individual structural components that are working together to function as a whole. The best way I can explain it is through the human body. So we know that the human body has many systems, right? And I even talked about my own story. We have a circulatory system, we have a neurological system, we have an endocrine system, we have all these different systems, and they have to all be working, they all have to be first present, and then they have to be working correctly in order for us to be healthy. Now, we can still function if one of the systems is sick or whatever to a point, but it will eventually take us down. Just like it did with me. And so we know that we've got to have all of our systems in place working together. It also is like thinking about a chain. So all of these various elements are individual links of a chain. Okay, those are the individual things. But when you think of a chain, it's linked together. And so they're all linked together to make up the structure of our church. Does that make sense? So there are what I call 8 essential elements that I believe every church needs to have in order to be healthy. And again, this is not, there's no way I can cover everything. I'm going to give you the very, very high 35,000 flyover view. In March, you can buy the book and make me feel good, because I hope to sell, at least like 10 maybe over the career of the book. But it'll unpack all this stuff a whole lot better than I can possibly do in just 15 minutes that I have left. But system 1 is outreach. So your church must have an outreach system. And when I say system, again, it's one of the individual links that's going to connect together to all the others to make up the whole structure of your church. Outreach is the only way that your church will ever see long-term sustainable growth. Okay? You'll see some families move in that will find your church because they have a Free Will Baptist background, or you'll have babies born in your congregation or whatever. But outreach is the only way that your church is going to see long-term sustained growth. Outreach includes so many more things than you would initially think of. It starts with things as simple as your church logo, your social media strategy, your website, your advertising, because all of those things are now front door to your church. 85 to 89% or something, Tom Rayner said this some time ago, and I forget now the exact number, but high 80% of people, especially millennials and younger generation, millennial generations and younger, will check your church out online before they ever come to visit. They're going to look at a video. If you have video online, they're going to see what your worship service looks like. They're going to see how your folks are dressed. They're going to see how they interact in the worship service, how big your church is, what they can expect. They're going to read a lot of stuff about your church before they ever show up. And so that's why all this stuff is important. You've got to have a recognizable logo that you put on everything. You need to have a color scheme that matches everything so it's recognizable, so that when you go out and you hang out door flyers, it looks the same as a poster does that you have at a festival or as a city event, and it looks the same as the logo that's on the tent that you have, that you set up at local, affairs, whatever. So the logo is important so it's recognizable. When a person decides for whatever reason they're going to attend church on any one given Sunday, whether it's Easter or whatever, they have many, many choices. But if they have seen your touches in the community through your logo, through your social media presence, through the events that you do and all that sort of thing, they're more likely to choose your church because they recognize something about it. And so it's just important. Some people hate the word, but it's branding. Okay, it's like marketing and branding. You're trying to brand your church in the community so that people recognize it when they have a need and they want to just show up to a church. They're going to be more likely to choose your church. We don't want to sit around and just make them come to our church. We'll talk more about that in just a second. But that's the place to start. But then it also includes your budget. How are we going to pay for all this stuff? How are we going to get it done through volunteers? All that sort of thing. So in outreach, there's two different kind of categories. The first one is on-site events, and the other one is off-site events. So on-site events are anything that you do at your church. So that's special services that you have, VBS, a carnival, an Easter egg hunt, a fall festival. Anything you do at your church is an on-site event. But then there's also the off-site events. So you may do a park cleanup, or you may do, we have one church I know of in a town that with city permission, don't just go out and do this on your own, but they paint fire hydrants. And they, one church I know, they paint addresses on curbs for people and stuff free of charge. So it's just an off-site event. I've been involved in churches where we did popsicle giveaways at parks, and water giveaways, and all kinds of different car washes, anything that you do off-site of your property where, again, you're helping people connect with your church because you're giving away information, you're registering people, and all that. So there are all kinds of things that you can do. I don't have time to get into any more specifics, but there's on-site and there's off-site events. But every outreach event has three very, very important elements. And these are the three most important things that you can't forget. The first one is planning. Okay, you've got to plan. If you fail to plan, you're going to fail. You've got to plan. You've got to plan everything. You've got to think through it in your mind. How this is going to work? What's this going to look like? What do we need? How do we get from point A to point B? It's all about planning. And then you have the event itself. So you've done all this planning, you spent all this money, you've done all this work, you've got all these volunteers. Now the big day is here. You hold the event. Now what? The third thing is often missing, and that's follow-up. Every event you do, you've got to have a way to follow up with people. If you don't have a way to register people and follow up with them, you've spent a lot of money, a lot of energy, you've thrown a great party, but it really hasn't benefited your church. Because the idea with every event is to get them to come to your church where they can hear the gospel. And so if you're just doing events for the sake of doing events, save yourself the money and the heartache and the trouble and the time, and don't do them. But every event, you need to do some registration. We did a huge carnival every year that we called our summer, good grief, the name just went out of my head. We did it every year. But anyway, it was a big carnival for the kids. And we did it in July. It's hot in Oklahoma, but we blocked off streets, and we had dunk tanks, and we had blow-up inflatable jumpy houses, and all kinds of carnival booths and free food and all that. But you had to have a ticket. They were free, but the only way you could get a ticket was you had to start at the registration booth, and we would get their name, their phone number, and their email address. That's all you need. If you can get a person's name, phone number, and email address, you can contact them in a number of ways. You can find them on social media. You can send them a text. You can call them. You can send them emails. So if you can get that information, then you can follow up with them. You also can give them packets of information when they register, telling about your VBS coming up or your next special services or whatever. So you're always doing something to follow up. So you've got to make sure you're planning, you're doing events, and you're following up. The second system is connections. This has gone through a word transformation, and if you've ever heard me talk about this stuff before, I used to call it assimilation. When I did the book, I changed the name to Connections because I wanted to better try to tie it together. But it's how we connect people to our church. Okay, so Connections overlaps with outreach, and you'll hear me say that a lot because like a chain, you see the links that are linked together, they overlap. And so a lot of these systems overlap, so that's not unusual to do that. But Connections really starts with first impressions, and that starts long before a person ever visits your church. So Connection starts when they see your logo. Connection starts when they see a door hanger. Connections happen when they come to an off-site event or an on-site event or whatever. So you have to think about how are we going to connect people, and again, that works through that registration and all that I talked about. Then when somebody does come to your church, how do you follow up with them? How do you reach out to them throughout that week? And I ask pastors that question all the time. I say, how do you usually follow up with people? And 99% of the time, pastors will say, well, we try to do this. We try to, call them, or we try to, and what that tells me by that one word, one three-letter word, try, means they don't have a system. Because if you have a system, then you don't try, but you know every single time on Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, they're going to get a text message saying, thank you for joining us this morning. We'd love to have you back. If you have any questions, you can reply to this text message or whatever. And there's a great resource there called Text in Church. That's an app. It's a subscription. You have to pay for it, but you can put the phone number of somebody in there, and all this stuff happens automatically. You set it up where they get a text message at 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon, thanking them for coming. On Monday, they're going to get an email. On Tuesday, they're going to get a phone call. On Thursday, they're going to, get something else, whatever. You can set up however you want to, and you can set it up to where automatically every guest that registers that comes to your church gets contacted, or they get these phone calls. They get these, or not the phone calls aren't automated, but you'd have to do those, but they'll remind you. But you can get a text message or an email or whatever. I'm running out of breath. I feel like I'm running a marathon. I'm trying really hard to get this in a little bit of time. But then also, what about second-time guests? Statistically, if somebody comes to your church 2 times, the chances exponentially go up for them to become a regular attender. But the truth is, very few churches even know if somebody's been to their church 1, 2, or 3 times. They just recognize them as a new person, but they don't. If somebody comes to your church twice, you've got to have some way to track this, and I don't have all the answers. I'm just saying you've got to figure out a way to do it. But if you can figure out who are second-time guests, then you can be a little more aggressive in trying to follow up with them and offer them next steps, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. And then third-time guests. So how do you move people along that process? You need a system to connect people to your church. It includes creating disciples. Again, what's that process to move people from a first-time guest to a member? Do you have LifeTrack? And we'll talk more about this. I'm just going to blow through this because my next session I'm going to talk about making disciples, and we're going to talk about this stuff in that session. So there's a great resource there that I'll mention again at that next session. I'll have a little more time. The small groups, D groups, ministry training, getting them involved in mission. How do we connect them through the church? And then how are people going to know the process that you have? You have to develop a pathway. That's what we'll talk about in the next one. System 3 is discipleship. How are you going to disciple people? This overlaps with connections. But how is your church going to make disciples? What is the process? We need to answer the question, what does discipleship look like in the Bible? We need to nail that down. What is a true disciple? Again, we'll talk about this in the next session. So I'm going to go through that real quick. System 4 is worship planning. Worship planning is more than coming in on Sunday morning and dog-earing a few hymn book pages, and then getting up and everybody knowing the first hymn, we're going to stand up and we're going to sing first, second, last verse. Everybody's going to stay standing for someone to lead in prayer. Then we sing the second hymn, first, second, last. Why do we just sing first, second, last? Why do we do that? I don't know. I mean, that's just the way it's like I would feel really bad if I was verse 4 in a hymn, because like you are always ignored, right? You never get any attention. But that's how we sometimes picture worship planning. It's filling in the blanks on the worship service, and every Sunday it's the same. We just have new songs and new message titles and new people singing specials that aren't usually always special. I'll just leave that alone. But in my experience, and I've visited close to 300 Free Will Baptist churches now, little thought and preparation is put into the Sunday morning worship service. It really is. And it's an indictment, not against you, but it's against all of us to say that, man, we have 1 hour on Sunday morning. 1 hour every week. That's all we have. And we ought to put everything that we possibly have into that hour to make it the very best that we can to connect with people so that we can beautifully package the most wonderful message we could ever share with anyone in giving them the gospel. But we spend very little time and little thought, in my opinion. It includes your setup, your decor, your order service, your topics, all those kinds of things. We don't have time to get into that. But if you fail to connect with people, then you will fail to connect them to your church. So you've got to connect with people. Then system 5 is financial. I know I'm going through this quick. If you miss something, I'll send this to you. Just let me know, and I'll email you my notes. Financial system. This is a long one. I don't have time to even scratch the surface. But your church needs a budget. You need to report more than just annually, but sending receipts and thank you letters. It's been a long time ago that I heard this, but someone once told me I read that the average gift to the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association was $5 a month. That was probably 20 years ago, but $5 a month. And for every donation, it didn't matter if it was a dime, they sent you a thank you letter and a receipt. And along with that thank you letter and receipt, they get an opportunity to share all the ways that the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association is having an impact in the world. And we miss that in the church. We just kind of expect people to give us their money, and at the end of the year, we give them something for their tax, their taxes if they itemize. But man, we should be sending them saying, "Thank you so much. Through your gifts, we're able to send Schmitz to Casa Grande, Arizona. We're able to partner with Chris Little Creek in the Czech Republic, and someday to plant a church in California, and we're able to help Julio and Chad, and this is all these things, and we're helping international missionaries, and we're helping the local crisis pregnancy center, and we've seen all these people impacted, and all these lives change. Man, wouldn't it make giving a lot more fun if we knew that we weren't just paying to keep the lights on at the church? I mean, that's not that exciting, but life change is exciting. And we need to be sharing that. And that's part of our financial system. But also, who has the authority to spend money? Have you ever had this happen in your church? I had it happen to me when I was pastoring one time. We got a bill from the local lumber yard, and it was like, who signed for that? It's like, we found out it was a Sunday school teacher, went down and bought some stuff. And I mean, it was okay. It wasn't abused, or it wasn't like, they weren't embezzling money. But it's like they really didn't have authority to spend money. But we didn't have a system for that. So really it was kind of a free-for-all. Whoever wanted to do, it was a small town, you just do what you do. But you need to have some kind of an annual internal audit for financial accountability. Protects your treasurer, protects your church, protects your reputation. And then having some type of an annual stewardship emphasis. Create multiple ways to give. A lot of people don't carry cash anymore, right? I mean, I'm of the old school, but I finally, a year ago, I quit carrying cash. And so if You know, I don't have money to throw in a plate. And so if you don't have some way for people to give online, if you don't have either a giving kiosk in your lobby where they can swipe a card or enter their bank information or whatever, and especially recurring giving, people like to have recurring giving. It helps your church, helps them. You've got to have multiple ways to give. And then the Tithe Talk or Generous Living moment is just taking 30 seconds to 1 minute before the ushers take up your offering, and just do like I talked about with the letters. Just say, here's the impact your giving has in our community. And just share a quick story so that people do realize that what they give is more than just paying the pastor's salary or paying the light bill. So it's giving them some information. And then being a generous church. We want our people to be generous to our church. Shouldn't our church be generous to the community? System 6 is member care. You've got to have a way to take care of all these things. You need to have a system for taking care of the flock in general. You need to have a system. Who reaches out to the sick? Who goes to the nursing home? Who takes care of the shut-ins? Who ministers to the widows and the orphans? If somebody needs something in your church, they can't always call the pastor. The pastor can't do everything. You need to have a system that helps with all of these types of things. System 7 is leadership. Again, this is another big one. We don't have time to really even scratch the surface, but it includes your paid staff and your volunteer staff. It's the same. You need to have a ministry description, a policy, and procedures manual. Again, that resource is there. How do you recruit volunteers? And then System 8 is evaluation. We've got to be willing to evaluate the things that we do in our church. Everything needs to be honest and touchable. Okay, so we need to be willing to say, hey, this isn't working. We need to evaluate this problem. We need a process for change that starts with staff meetings. You may say, hey, I'm the only guy on staff. That's fine. Most churches do have one paid staff person, but you have top-level, volunteers that are over ministries or whatever. Meet with them once a month if you can, and talk about things. Talk about things that are going right, things that are going wrong, and get their input. There's tools. There's all kinds of online tools, programs, and apps that you can use. Things like Planning Center and Right Now Media, and there's just tons and tons of apps and programs that you can use to help you to keep track, to keep a scorecard, what I call a scorecard, tracking your attendance, your offerings, all those types of things. You need some kind of a scoreboard so that you know where things are. And then use a tool that we call the 4 helpful list. This is not original with me, but it's very simple to say we're just going to look at the things that are right, the things that are wrong, the things that are confusing, and the things that are missing. That's the 4 lists. And it's in the book. I don't have time to break it down. But it's just saying that with everything, we're going to evaluate it. We're going to look at what's right, what's wrong, what's confusing, and what's missing, and then we're going to fix it. I don't have time to deal with understanding vicious cycles, so I'm done. Three minutes late, sorry.
You're good. For pastors, North American missions have a boot camp. It's intensive. Brad does a deep dive on systems. It's worth it. Church, if you're able to send your pastor to the boot camp at NAM, it is amazing. And so our worship team is here. They need to set up. We're going to take a 5-minute break. When you hear the music, come in, and we're going to spend a few minutes in worship.